I keep hearing people make this argument that somehow it matters that children who have an underlying health condition are the ones who are dying or being hospitalized. That doesn't matter, Charlie. The fact is that these are children, and some of these children aren't even aware if they have an underlying condition, and that's not 100% of the data. So when we continue to create this us and them narrative that somehow says, well, the only children who are dying are those that have an underlying health condition, well, hell, you can have an underlying health condition. That does not make you any less significant as it relates to a virus or the spread of a virus that's preventable. So are we having an argument about a civil liberty? Because if this is an argument about a civil liberty, then the COVID issue is a separate argument, because you have no issue with your seatbelt mandate. You have no issue with your mandate to have a driver's license, even though you can buy a car without it. You have no issue with these other mandates, which are required for the safety of others. But you have an issue with this mandate, which we've already established that statutorily school boards have the authority to implement these mandates, and American citizens, by and large, are for the mandates in K through 12 education.
So I'll get to the civil liberties in a second. As you notice, I didn't mention it all. I'm saying this is a bad idea. Right? This is bad for children, and also it's bad for teachers, bad for an educational environment. And so I'm going to reiterate one thing. I'm not minimizing that it's children with underlying health conditions that are dying, but children with underlying health conditions have a predisposition from dying from any sort of infectious disease. And the vast majority of children in this country are healthy, which is why we frame it in that way. And so this kind of goes to this question, a couple different questions, and I would love to ask this question to you. Let's just focus on whether this is a good idea, then we could focus on whether the government has the ability. Do you think there are any downsides to children wearing masks in schools?
Hell yeah. Of course there are downsides to it. There are downsides to wearing a seatbelt. You know, a percentage of people die every year for wearing a seatbelt, but the vast majority of them have their lives saved. So let me be clear on this, Charlie.
So go ahead.
Let me be clear on this. There will always be a cause and effect relationship with any social variable change implemented in our current structural society, no matter what. Masks create changes. It is a social deviation from the norm. But when you look at the risk of a child either having severe respiratory complications forever, potentially dying, or potentially infecting their parents or grandparents, we weigh that. We weigh the same variables as it relates to vaccines that are already mandated. Brother, in the school system, the vaccines that are already mandated are very clear. Mumps,
measles, polio,
all
rubella.
of them. Every single one of them. But do you have an issue with those?
It's a totally different type of vaccine, first of all. First of all, those take 10 to 15 years on average to develop. Secondly, they've just changed the definition of a vaccine.
So you have an issue with the vaccine, not the intrusion or
Well, again, we'll get to the civil liberty part of it, right?
Okay.
So I'm not saying that a school does not have the ability to mandate certain things. Instead, my argument is that this is detrimental to children. Their development, mental health issues, their ability to interact, and it doesn't even do what you say it's going to do. So let me just read something. That a study was done about masks that shows that if the mask is even adjusted by 3.2%, it totally invalidates any sort of efficacy of a mask.
Who did that study, Charlie?
Well, this was written by Daniel Horowitz, and it was Stephen Petty, one of the most experienced certified industrial hygienists and exposure experts in the country, has a study that he did on this. So Stephen Petty, the audience can look at it, and they can have their own sort of interpretation. Now, most of the mask studies that you're probably going to mention are done in laboratory-style environments, not with 6-year-old children. And you can agree, you've seen 6-year-olds, they're moving the mask all the time, which totally negates any sort of potential benefit. So if kids aren't going to wear them properly and the cloth mask is basically a joke, then why subject them to this kind of submissive kind of cloth face diaper?
All right, so you're incorrect on the data. So let me go ahead and correct that data. First off, the data that you're citing is what we call an outlier data set.
Okay.
92% of the field of actual research scientists agree that masks decrease the spread of COVID. As a matter of fact, the only deviation from that agreement is by how much. The lowest end is 10%, the highest is 91%.
Can I ask a question about that?
I get to.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second, brother.
You got it.
All right. So University of California, they have a study and they posted this just a few days ago. And if anybody wants to read it, it's called Still Confused About Mask. Okay. One of the lab studies that they highlighted showed in a high-speed camera scenario, respiratory droplets. This is how the virus travels with the viral load. Those respiratory droplets were found within 20 to 500 micrometers. That's your size. They were generated from saying a simple phrase. So just talking to somebody creates a viral load 20 to 500 micrometers, right? Having a cloth in front of your mouth decreased it by virtually 100%. Now, that flies in the face of individuals who say, well, cloth masks do nothing. And remember, cloth masks are also now recommended for public use by the CDC and the World Health Organization. So when you say they do absolutely nothing, even the data that you cite that says it doesn't do as much is at 10% effectiveness. The other data, that's the majority of the data, says it does it at 80 to 90% effectiveness.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding your position. Your position is that, first of all, does that study factor in whether they wear the mask correctly or not? Whether that they're touching the mask all the time and they're moving it? Does that study factor for that?
This study factors for droplets that are
so it doesn't.
transmitted.
Okay. And that's fine.
But think about it, Charlie.
I mean, a 7-year-old's not going to not touch
your
their face
issue,
and move their
brother,
mask.
think about it. Your issue, the argument you're making with me is an argument of education. That means that young people have to be more educated. I'm a former high school teacher. All right, there are high school students that may not wear the mask properly. There are grown folks that don't wear the mask properly.
Well, that's part of the argument.
The issue then is education and proper wearing of the mask. You're literally making my argument for me.
That's part of the argument. The
but
other argument,
you're making my argument saying if you wear it properly, then it does in fact decrease the spread of COVID.